Hey, what's up? I'm Alex.
I'm Jack.
We are one half of All Time Low, and you're hanging out with us and Rob on Front Row Live.
Alex, Jack, it's awesome to be able to reunite with you guys. It's been such a long time, and I've been so happy seeing how much this band has evolved. I feel like I've been there from early on, and I've been able to see like that progression that you guys have had. 20 years, not every band could say 20 years that they've been not only alive as a band, but also successful the way that you guys have been. As you guys kind of look back over those years, like what would you say like that evolution was like? Do you feel like it was a natural progression, or do you feel like it was something that you guys were trying to step it up every single time that you guys got together to write new music?
First of all, thank you for saying that's
Yeah.
very kind. Yeah, I mean, I think it has been a natural progression over the years. I think with our band, it's really interesting because it's spanning 20 years. It's a lot of music, and there have been a lot of twists and turns throughout our career. We came up as an independent band and then made a jump to a major label. That major label did not work out for us, and that record was, while a record that I absolutely adore, career wise, it kind of felt like it threw us into a bit of a tailspin for a minute. And then we ended up coming out the other side and re-signing with an indie label, back with our original label, and then almost having to like really intentionally right the ship and change course again to get us back on track. And so, I think the beauty of that though is that we have had such a long time to craft this really amazing kind of grassroots loyal fan base that has stuck with us for so many years, and it's really inspiring and keeps us inspired and keeps us driven to keep going into the studio and making new music that not only feels like it caters to what All Time Low is known for, but continues to push the envelope every time and bring something new and bring something interesting. And I attribute a lot of that to why we've been lucky enough to last.
Yeah, I don't think that it's been the type of career that was an overnight success type thing. I think that it very much has been a slow and steady type career,
Exactly.
even though we've had those big moments along the way, where it's felt like, oh, this is like really becoming something. Then there's been some missteps, and so it's like been like a lot of this, but always kind of on the up. And so, it's been definitely a freaking journey.
Yeah, it's a roller coaster ride doing it for as long as we have. And it's, I think at the end of the day, we're just really grateful that we continue to have people who are showing us love and showing interest in the music, and it keeps us going.
The ninth album just dropped on Friday, Tell Me I'm Alive, and it's you guys just continue to evolve, both as musicians, as vocalists, as performers, as songwriters. This album says that, and I love how different it kind of is. Like it's a more mature kind of record, in all sort of ways. Diving into the studio to create this record sonically, what inspired this album?
I think a lot of inspiration came from artists I grew up listening to. A lot of exposure and re-exposure to artists like the Beatles and Queen and Elton John and Prince and Bowie. And I think at this point in our career, we know what an all-time low song sounds like. We know how to make an all-time low record, and we know what doesn't feel like all-time low. And I think there's a lot of safety in that. There's a really good, I think Geddy Lee said it. I'm going to probably misquote him, but there's a really great quote where he says essentially like the artists that last and artists that continue to grow are the ones who have so many influences from all over the place that you can't tell who or what exactly they're pulling from when they pull from their inspirations, and it ends up sounding like nothing but them. And I think we're in a really that isn't meant to sound like I'm complimenting us on our awareness or something like that, but I think we're in a really nice sweet spot right now where we're so familiar with what All Time Low is and what's at the core of our music, that when we pull from these inspirations like the Beatles or Queen or Elton John, it's not us. It doesn't come across as us doing a direct impression or impersonation of that artist. It's like just sprinkling in a little bit of that inspo to enhance what All Time Low is known for. And so I think with that we can pivot really dynamically without completely throwing people off the scent of it being an all-time low song.
That reminds, like, for an example of like what Alex just said, like the background vocals on like the second verse of Calm Down are very like Beach Boysy, and it's like stuff like that, and you're peppering in these like little things that you probably wouldn't hear on older all time low records, but I think are just little things that are like, oh, this still sounds like all time low, but it's like slightly different.
It's a moment that pulls the listener into like, oh, that's interesting. I haven't heard them do that before, without being like, oh, they're doing Queen.
No, and I totally got that with this album. I think it was Modern Love with the piano, that intro with the piano, and also the cadence of that intro. Like, it just gave me early Rocket Summer vibes. And
Oh,
Nice.
it was
cool.
like, it was really cool. I was like, that's really, like, it felt really nostalgic, but at the same time, it's obviously all time low.
Love that.
And that was, that was one of the favorite songs on this album. But because you said, like, now you know what an all time low record sounds like, or music sounds like, I'm sure that's why it's so important to have producers and co-writers like Zach Cervini and Andrew Goldstein, who have been with you guys for quite some time. But how are you guys able to kind of have that friendship and still be able to get pushed in the studio when you guys are recording new music specifically for this album?
I think that it's kind of been Alex pushing the envelope, and like Goldstein and Cervini kind of keeping it on track, if that makes sense. I think that Alex, because he's such a knowledge of vast array of different artists, like he just mentioned. And not saying that Goldstein and Cervini don't, but I think that they both, we grew up with Goldstein, and Cervini grew up an all-time low fan. So they both, are so aware of who this band is, the DNA of this band, where we come from, where we want to go, that they're able to take, Alex's wild ideas and be like, let's all-time lowify that.
100%. I think they're a great counterweight to like me reaching, or us reaching for wanting to try new things, different things, and experiment within what all time low is. Yeah, they're a great counterweight to being like, Zach, for example, was an all time low fan first. He came up on our music and liked our music before we ever worked with him. And so I think it's a really helpful opinion to have in the creative zone, because he's coming at it from a place that we could never come at it from. He's coming at it like, I remember being a fan, and this is what I loved about you. This is what drew me to your music. And so he can kind of make sure that we're kind of capturing that along the way, even if I am standing and going, I really want to make something that feels super different for all time low. It kind of, like you said, keeps it on the rails.
Alex, most recently, your name has been popping up a lot more as like part of the production, co-producing. How are you able to separate Alex, the producer, and then Alex, the artist, when you're in the studio creating the music that you are?
That's a great question. I don't know that I think about it all too much. It's really just this sense of I think, having done it for as long as I have now, I have picked up on enough of the tools and the skill sets to kind of, not only do I approach it from a songwriting standpoint and go, okay, here's the crux of the song, and this is the concept, and this is the melody, and this is the lyric, but it's also like, I know how I want it to sound. And now it's not just that I know how I want it to sound, it's like, I know how to make it sound that way. And I think that is where you sort of shift into that world of producing, in the sense of like, usually that's what the producer is there to do. It's like, take the artist's idea and form it into something that sounds a certain way. And these days I just feel like I kind of know just a bit more about the ins and outs of how to coalesce something into a recorded song.
Even when it comes to like Alex, deciding what the harmonies are going to be, what the actual drum parts are going to be, sometimes, what's going to cut out in a certain section, and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
So much of that informs, I think, how a song connects with people. And it was something that I didn't realize at first, but it's the songwriting itself is I would say the most important part to a good song, but there is so much that weighs heavily upon the musical choices and the rhythmic choices and the cadences. And you can write an amazing song and play it on piano, and it's like, oh, that was absolutely incredible. But then you add drums, bass, guitar, keys, synths, and if those things aren't in lockstep with what the song is trying to accomplish, it can actually really derail the song. And I think in years past, I've experienced that firsthand and gone like, oops, I didn't catch that. And if I had done this, if this kick pattern was simpler, if this, if this chord progression was different here, if it went to the minor over this note, it would feel that much more tense. And it's just being able to make those choices with a bit more of an informed sensibility,
which are definitely like production things as opposed to songwriting. And
for sure.
And what you just said reminds me of Sound of Letting Go on a new record, where like, God, we went through like 15 iterations of that song trying to get it to sound like All Time Low and trying to get to kind of for the choruses to pop off the way they do now, while still having like, it's such a mix of like jingly guitars, as I like to say, and also synth and piano as well with real drums, and then also with program drums.
Bite.
So it's like, yeah.
Our inclination on that one was to wanting to keep leaning more and more rock and having more dirty guitars and things like that. And the more we leaned that way, there was some magic being lost. Mm-hmm. And it was like it just became really linear. And so the only way to fix that was to get away from our tendency of wanting to do something really driving and distorted. And once we leaned into those cleaner sounding guitars and put some of that bite on the bass, it kind of suddenly the low end was doing the heavy lifting in that way, and everything else felt like ear candy. And it was like, oh, that's the sweet spot.
Yeah, it's weird when you make the guitars less distorted, but it somehow rocks more.
Right.
It's like a very like weird, hard thing to describe. You know what I mean?
But you guys did have a good distortion on a song that I think this might be my favorite song, New Religion. You had the distorted guitars on it. You also had Teddy Swims, who is incredible. But yeah. Alex, you did something different that at least I have never heard you do vocally before. And that was the why, like that falsetto that you did, like just very Queen-ish, I guess. I think more like Adam Levine type. Like you did that with your vocals and it felt so natural. But like, again, I don't remember ever hearing you do that before. So what kind of challenge did you face in doing that? And what really inspired that particular song the way that it did?
Good question.
I think a lot of it came from just, again, that idea of wanting to push the envelope of what I guess pop rock and pop punk can be. I think I've always sort of shied away from this hard label of All Time Low being a pop punk band, because you tend not to hear those kinds of sensibilities in vocals in pop punk music. And I will say that vocally, I really only was inspired vocally by pop punk early on. It was Offspring and Blink and Green Day, and that style of singing was really a factor for me in the early formative years of All Time Low. But then pushing beyond that, I kind of like started exploring like the way Prince was singing, the way Freddie Mercury was singing, the way, and going like there's something there, you can do more with a broader tool set and taking inspiration from other artists that are outside of the genre, but then bringing those in and kind of peppering them in, like I said, to music that at its core is still coming from this pop rock inspired place. And it was just that for that song, I was kind of like, how would The Weeknd do this?
Yeah. And not even when it comes to vocals with that song, because the bridge is a guitar part and the breakdown is a guitar part. And we kind of, with it to make it not sound like a guitar part, to kind of take it outside, I guess, the rock world, but it still rocks. And I think that like it's such a cool, unique bridge, and probably I'd say one of everyone's favorite moments on that record. And just doing something different, man. Just trying to change it up.
Yeah, the studio is a sandbox, it goes without saying. And it's like, I think the more you push yourselves to just play with the toys that you have available to you in the studio, the better the results. Obviously sometimes, and that's why you need people like Zach and Andrew to keep you on the rails, because you can go too far and it can suddenly just be like, I don't know what we're making anymore.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's really fun to play around with tool sets that you don't typically use in your music every day. And I think some of the best results have come from that. I think it started with songs like Life of the Party on Last Young Renegade. Like that song is one, again, where I sort of went up into my upper register and was singing in falsetto and head voice, and just something I'd never really done all that much in our music, but it worked. And I went like, this is something that we can play around with. And that kind of, that came across on New Religion for sure.
To close us off, I'd keep you guys forever, but to close us off, early on, 20 years ago, Paul Leavitt was the original producer with the band.
Yeah.
Obviously, you guys didn't know where you guys were going to be at 20 years later, but you guys were in high school during that time trying to figure out life. How did Paul Leavitt guide you guys to the direction of this music industry, this music world early on in your career?
Wow, great question. I'll tell you a bunch of things he did. First of all, he got us using a click track or a metronome, for those who don't know what click track is. And I think that he just kicked our ass in the way that
we needed.
It was like I would play a guitar part and he'd be like, no, can play it right, or like you're like a second behind, and then I was like, no, I'm not, I'm playing it on. He's like, you're actually not.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it kind of was like boot camp for musicians and as songwriting, but also as performances for all of us.
Yeah.
And I think he made us all better musicians as well as songwriters.
I think he just made us aware that there was a process.
Yeah.
I mean? It was like before that, we were just kind of kids that were, figuring it out for ourselves. And he was the first person that we came up against that was like, in a good way, went like, to your point, no, you should play in time.
Yeah. You're not playing in time, dude.
or like, hey, I know that you think that you're singing a harmony, but that is not a harmony. And these notes are crossing and this is rubbing and it doesn't sound good. Here's how you do a harmony. Like, you need to learn those lessons a little bit in order for music to work. And he was very integral in pushing us to get a little bit better. And I think he kind of sped up the growth process for this band because we were kids, we were kids.
You were singing properly as well. Remember, like you lose your voice.
I lose my voice every time in the studio.
Yeah.
And he was like, you should consider, trying to reevaluate the way you sing because you're losing your voice every time you do it. And yeah, it was very informative. And also he was just so ahead of the curve with production for the time. I mean, he really we had no right back then making music that sounded as pro as it did, if that makes sense. Like, he was very integral in helping us craft something that elevated us to a point where people even took us seriously. Because without him, I think we would have been making demos in our bedroom that didn't sound all that good. And while it would have been appropriate for the time, it made us stand out. And that was so helpful because it got eyes on us and it launched us into being in a place where labels started taking us seriously. And it gave us a chance to actually do this professionally. I think without him, we wouldn't be 100%.
Here.
That's crazy. Well, congratulations, guys. I'm glad 20 years later, you guys are still going strong. Congratulations with this album. Thank you for releasing such a masterpiece. And I look forward to catching up with you guys again soon.
Thank you so much for the kind words.
It's awesome meeting someone that saw us on our first tour ever. So that's
my God.
Yeah, I can't get over that.
That's
that
crazy.
So crazy.
Yeah.